Namaste to you all, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Lall Show on Kaiju Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. As we promised last Monday, we will continue where we left off, but of course we want you to pay keen attention and encourage your friends and family to join us this evening as we fight for a better Guyana. So without further ado, we'll hand you over to the man of the moment who will make his presentation. Once time permits us, of course we'll take your calls and read your messages. Mr. Lall, namaste, and over to you.
Namaste. Namaste. 622-2222, you can WhatsApp us. Hide nothing, for time which sees all, and hear all, exposes all. Lovely words. Guyana has become the most corrupt country on earth. We are 1 trillion times worse off than any African, Asian, and Arabian oil countries. Lall saying this. Our leaders allowed all of us to get robbed on Lisa 1, raped on Lisa 2, screwed on Lisa 3, the Payara, with no kind of insurance whatsoever to safeguard and protect Guyana and the entire region. Joshua?
Yes, sir.
Auntie and uncle, you guys would allow them to go ahead with the 4th project when we can put it on a whole, correct the ones you get robbed, raped, and screwed on. Josh, over to you and over to Guyana. Share that and let's move on. It's still Wednesday. Namaste again to all of you. Can you believe that this is an oil producing country with the 2nd largest oil reserves per citizens in the world? Oil is the most valuable thing on earth today. And all you hear about, Uncle, in the media houses and the talk shows is who kill who thief this, and who trying to thief that, who get remanded and who gets jail, who get little flood money from who ain't get, which politicians say this and which one do that, who friends getting contract from who ain't getting, and not a word on our trillion US dollar industry you're hearing from our leaders of this land. It's not sad, Miss Harris. I don't know what to call that. Today, I attended another court case in Berbice via Zoom, where the treasurer of the Corriverton Town Council, a lady named Ronika Griffith, sued the newspapers in June of 2020 for carrying a story in which she was sent home by the council in relation to a fraud of $3.2 million. This morning was the 6th time the matter called up. She never appeared. My lawyer, Arud Gosai, who never took a cent from me on this case, asked Justice Fidela Corbin to dismiss the case, and she promptly did. Thanks, Judge. And a big thank you to you, Arud. Cheers. We would never know what's in store for us in life, not even for the next 5 minutes. As I wait to attend the court hearing this morning, I received a call from a gentleman in Canada telling me, Glenn, I want to send you $2 million to help with all those court judgments. I smiled and said to him, "Thank you, sir. If or when I need help, I will get back to you." I didn't even tell him I am putting on my clothes to go to a court, for another lawsuit. Our Creator works in mysterious ways. Harris? Some people sue you out of shame and run away from it. Others sue you to take shame out and bleed you. I am being reminded how the government got 3 lawyers listening to every one of these programs, waiting for me to slip up to sue me. Media houses, uncle and auntie, is not an easy thing for run. I created a TikTok account today just to tick these leaders every moment of the day. Y'all please join me on it. Every day I'll be having a field day with them, with what they're doing. In short, 1 minute and 2 minute videos. When leaders cannot respond to media reports, they resort to telling their supporters that Kaicho News is peddling lies. Just recently, President Ali went to Borbis, and a man asked him about the interest rate Guyana paying on the Exxon loans. He told the man, "Oh, you listening to the Lall show? We got all the answers for him." To this date, we have not seen the answers to the numerous questions we have been posing on a daily basis, much less the interest rate answer. You guys remember I texted all of them, Harmon, Jagdev, and all of them on that matter. And the petty run away and hiding and ducking answers they give. Well, guys, tonight you will hear more questions, not from Lall or the Kaicho News. You will hear international experts asking questions, and you will hear for your own ears, your own self, how ExxonMobil, ERM, this independent company that was contracted to do the EIA for Guyana on this 4th project, along with EPA. You would hear it for yourselves. Could we play the first tape? Thank you. Please listen carefully.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Macaulay, and I am from the island of Jamaica, an environmental activist for about 30 years, the founder of the Jamaica Environment Trust, although this evening I'm not speaking for them. And I came here tonight after I became aware of the impacts of an oil spill on other Caribbean countries from this deep well project that we are now discussing. And I came to say that this EIA must be shared with other Caribbean countries. This is not a Guyana project. This is not only about the impacts to Guyana. There is a graph in chapter 9 that shows in one of the scenarios that were modeled, oil will sweep along the north coast of Trinidad, Tobago, some of the Lesser Antilles, the entire south coast of Jamaica, including the port of Kingston, and as far as the Dominican Republic. So this is not a Guyana business. The EIA is extremely long, and it needs enough time for everyone, if affected, which is not just Guyana, to look at it and for there to be discussion between our governments. I hear the usual comment, which I'm very used to hearing here in Jamaica. Oh, these comments are to be directed at the EIA consultants, but it is governments who are going to give permission for this to happen. So that is why I came here tonight. But I also want to say, is it not abundantly clear to everyone in this virtual room that we have got to move away from oil and gas drilling anywhere in the world in the final few days of the COP26 conference? Are we really going to allow this to happen in the Caribbean Sea, where our governments, we know, are not capable of holding large multinational companies to account? Have we not seen what has happened in Nigeria, in the Amazon? Even the Louisiana coast in the US is sinking. Do we not know what the oil and gas industry has done to the very atmosphere? And we are going to sit here this evening as if we are talking about actuarial tables or something that is more boring than you can imagine, instead of our survival. That is what I want to say. I am appalled at the whole sound of this evening, as if we are discussing something of no moment. And as a Jamaican, my government needs to liaise with your government, and the people in my country and all of the other Caribbean countries need an opportunity to look at this EIA and see what threats are being put upon us for what. That is what I have to say.
Thank you very much. The EIA is a public document. I'll speak about the period for review shortly, the statutory period before we close, but feel free to share it as well. And we have noted your your concern, and there's also an opportunity to make further written submissions on your comments and your recommendations moving forward.
Can you please tell us how to make those written submissions?
Yes, I'll do that before the close of the meeting. Thank you.
Miss Diana Macaulay, that's a proper Jamaican woman. She said, this is not only a Guyana thing, this is a regional thing. She said oil will reach Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and way down south to Jamaica, down to the Dominican Republic. The entire region, she said, and all must be concerned. I only hope the leaders understand what these people are saying, not Glenn Lall saying those words. The lady said, this is not an EIA project. This is the government. It's the government who will be granting permission. And they have to be aware of the consequences and seriousness of it. She is correct. The EPA had nothing to do, had no say on the third project, Payara. Jagdev just signed it off. He just signed it off. Could you play the next? You have anything to say? You want to say something?
Yeah, I think what Ms. Macaulay was referring to was the fact that the model that they based their predictions for an oil spill on was, inadequate. It didn't take into consideration the changing currents and tides brought on because of global warming and climate change. It didn't take into consideration the impacts of, if this were to occur during hurricane season, how that would affect all of these islands in our region. So it's just a horrible job that they've done, and they're trying to pass it off as though they've consulted people, when many of those in the areas that will be affected have no idea that this is even going on. So I think a lot of other regional actors had called for them to make the document readily available to all our Caribbean neighbors who would be affected. And I think that's exactly what they need to do.
I must also add that 1, 2, and Payara project, when I asked them for the recording, they told me they didn't record it. It's not that they didn't record it, my dear. They didn't want to put that video into Glenn Lall's hand because they know what I would have been doing with it.
Yes.
Could you play our next speaker? Thank you.
So I have my questions concern, they were for all three persons, three things. So you'll have to, I'm trying to bring my questions up. Yes, so I want to speak about the standards and best practices. So I would like the EIA to say which standards are obligatory in the industry and which best practices are being followed. Where are these obligatory standards documented in the EIA? Where can we find these best practices? For instance, where is the logbook for each practice referred to or a sample given? Where are the monitoring and reporting procedures in respect of each standard? Where are the reports from monitoring from the LISA 1, LISA 1 wells? And could you name the independent auditors that are verifying which aspects of your operations? And where are the audit reports published? Additionally, please share the pre-treatment and monitoring of pollutants and hazardous elements prior to discharge in accordance with permit requirements, international conventions, standards, and the supposedly best oil and gas industry practice. Now, we all know in the world that related to the goings-ons of the oil and gas industry, that we need 1.5 Celsius to stay alive, 1.5 to stay alive. We know that Exxon has had a history in suppressing science over the years and its impacts on global warming, but we hope that there are some more enlightened Exxon people working here in Guyana. So concerning 1.5 Celsius warming and the need for EIA to model for the 1.5 Celsius warming, we're asking if you could please explain how you will manage each risk, including the impact of sea level rise on a receding shoreline, of receding riverbanks, impact on fish nurseries, and therefore livelihoods of fishers, and the impacts of ExxonMobil related shore-based hazardous waste facilities, such as the one next door to me here at Schlumberger, with radioactivity sources to be stored, etc., at Houston, East Van Demerara, Guyana, and the impacts on the general health and well-being of humans. My question is, has the EIA quantified emissions, including yellowtail exploration, drilling, transportation, flaring, oil lifts, oil barrel discharges, and modeled climate impacts based on emissions of carbon dioxide and CH4 and its impact in pushing global warming levels above 1.5 Celsius? Guyana and its low-lying coastline has been cited as one of 10 countries worldwide which could be underwater from the sea incursion by 2030, based on the IPCC, the whole panel of hundreds of scientists the world over, in their 2021 report. And according to current global projections of rise in global warming to 1.7 to 2%, which seem likely to happen if ExxonMobil's expansion of new fossil fuel drilling, such as Yellowtail et al., and all of the other oil blocks it has lined up to take place. Have you therefore specifically in your EIA addressed the cumulative effects and impacts of ExxonMobil oil drilling contributing to Guyana's sea warming? Have you specifically addressed the cumulative risks and impacts of these fossil fuels, especially the yellowtail, including flaring, which are in contravention of the UN, of our climate agreement that Guyana and all of the Caribbean signed in 2015 in Paris, and is ratified by Guyana, and there are targets set, global targets set and agreed globally. these are my questions, and I'd like them answered. And just to finally say, this is a recommendation. Don't take it lightly. If all of your planning at ExxonMobil, EPGL, etc., is so wonderful, then may I ask personally that you bypass Houston, East Bank, Demerara, Guyana, and take all your waste and all your radioactivity and all of the toxicity back to Houston, Texas. I think this would be a very good solution. Thank you very much.
Good one,
Thank you, Ms.
Vanda.
Vanda.
Yeah,
Marley?
yeah. This is Jason Willie from ERM. I can certainly take the
Jason
first
Willie.
two questions on the standards and the monitoring procedures. There are 3 volumes to the EIA, and the third volume contains all of the management plans. And one of the management plans is called the Environmental and Social Management Plan. And that particular document in volume 3 has tables that list the standards that the consultancy has recommended be applied to the project, as well as the monitoring procedures. You also asked about applicable treaties. There is a list of applicable treaties in I believe it's chapter 4 of the or no, I'm sorry, I think it's chapter 3 of the EIA, the administrative framework. There's a table of those treaties and a brief summary of what they entail and the key agreements in those treaties. I don't know, Todd, do you want to take the climate one?
Yeah, sure. So I heard a couple of questions about what the EIA does or doesn't include. The first was, does the EIA include quantified emissions? The answer to that is yes. The EIA includes, as I mentioned on one of the slides, an emissions inventory for what are called criteria pollutants, as well as greenhouse gases. So, a detailed year by year inventory for the entire project life cycle for Yellowtail of the greenhouse gas emissions that will emanate from the project. There was a follow-up to that about whether the EIA addresses cumulative impacts. And the answer to that is also yes. So in addition to quantifying the emissions of greenhouse gases from the Yellowtail project, a similar inventory was prepared for all of the offshore projects that are within what we call the cumulative impact assessment basis. So there's a list of the past approved and reasonably foreseeable future projects, inclusive of exploration drilling, and the greenhouse gas emissions for all of those are quantified, added together, and that's presented in the cumulative impact assessment section in chapter 10. And then there was a question about modeling of climate impacts, and this one is a challenging one because the nature of impacts to climate are of a global scale. And so the global climate models that are used to run all of the analyses around the 1.5 degree to 2 degree scenarios, those are of a scale that where the impact from any one project wouldn't show up on that. It just doesn't. It's not like an air dispersion model where it's a relatively small scale model where you can predict where those particular emissions are going. Because of the nature of climate impacts, you simply can't model that within a level of accuracy that would be worth doing. Now that said, the focus of the EIA is on assessing the degree to which the project is doing the appropriate things to mitigate emissions of greenhouse gases from a project of this nature. You had comments about the Paris Agreement. Those are great comments. Those comments are of a policy nature, and the purpose of the EIA is to assess for an oil and gas project, whether appropriate mitigation measures are being taken. So that's what the EIA does.
Ms. Vanda, I'm still seeing your hand up. Do you have a
Sorry.
follow-up?
No, I am finished. I'm finished. Just that perhaps it would be interesting because we can't escape from the fact that what fossil fuels is doing, what what ExxonMobil supported by ERM is doing, is contributing to the bad things of our planet and contributing to the warming above the 1.5 to stay alive. And this can't be swept under the rug. Sorry to have to say, but that is the honest truth. And it is happening, and ExxonMobil is going to be damaging and destroying not only Guyana and so on, but the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well said, Vanda. Beautifully put. She asked, where are the audit reports? Not a word you hear about that.
Exactly.
She talked about, yes, Guyana will be one of the 10 cities by 2030. Will be covered with water. We didn't hear anything about that. All you heard, Ms. Harris, go to the 7,400 pages for the answers. I wonder if they're going to wait until the Guyanese people study that document before they run ahead any further. Guyana, this is not hoodwink. This is crookery. This is gangsterism going on all of us. Ms. Harris?
Yeah, Miss
ahead.
Radzik was very clear in what she was saying, and for me, when she told them to pack up their waste and take it back to Houston, Texas, that was probably the best thing to do. And in all seriousness, it probably makes the most sense, because we don't have the facilities, we don't have the training, and we don't have the overall expertise to manage hazardous waste. We can't even deal with the rubbish in Stabroek Market.
Exactly.
And they want to bring hazardous waste containing radioactive materials into this country and into residential areas as well. That makes no sense. They've got communities living within a mile of these facilities. Is the EPA even monitoring what goes on at these facilities? So I'm glad that Ms. Radzik was able to highlight those issues.
Radioactive materials. Guyanese doesn't have a clue what that is.
Exactly.
That is not dangerous. It's not extremely dangerous. That is deadly. A matter of fact, one of the answers they give, they said that they dispose of those type of chemicals not in Guyana, but they dispose it in sealed containers and placed it way beneath the ocean floor. When asked what they're doing with it now out there, they said they didn't have all they said, they weren't bringing it to Guyana. So where those chemicals are being dumped? No, they did never answer that question. The only thing they say, it's not coming in to the Hogs Wash at Eccles.
Yeah.
You know, if radioactive materials, if they bury that there, it kills all of us slowly.
Exactly.
Because it gets into the earth, into our water,
Precisely.
into our wells,
Yes.
and that's what we will be consuming.
Exactly.
It's extremely dangerous, Uncle. And nothing our leaders saying. Imagine President Jagdeo said they did this cradle to grave management system. And he can't deal with the garbage outside your own office with it. Everything these people doing to us, Uncle and Auntie, is gangsterism. And I'm so happy that you guys can hear it from these experts. Vanda Radzik is a Guyanese who live right next to Schlumberger at Houston on the east bank of Demerara. You heard her yourself. You hear the amount of questions she asked, and not one of them they answered. They choose to answer and hoodwink us. Could you play Dr. Jailal for me, please? Dr. Jailal is a Canadian, a Guyanese Canadian. Play him for me.
Okay, so we have about a 5-part question there. So the EIA says that an oil spill has a high intensity of impact, very low probability. How do both intensities of impact and probability of occurrence change over time from the time you open a deep well to the decommissioning? Also, if a spill does occur and you clean up, where will you dump the toxic waste? The EIA says nothing about this.
You let me to take these one by one, Ms. Power Compton, or go through all 5?
So you want me to go ahead and read all of them?
It's up to you. I can stop there if that's easier for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the question was how do the intensities or the probabilities change for an oil spill potential? And as I mentioned earlier, at a high level, this typically happens, a loss of well control. I won't say always, but most frequently when it does happen, it happens during the drilling phase, which is, a couple of months for a well. I don't know if the EPGL, Steve, if you'd like to add on to that, but that's probably the high level answer to that part of the question.
All right, so when we talk about yellowtail, our history determines how we react to yellowtail. And so the question is there insurance for Liza 1, Liza 2? Which company issued the insurance? What is the third-party coverage? Where's the proof of the insurance? There was also no formal guarantee between ExxonMobil and the Guyana government that it would cover in full the shortfall of costs associated with an unmitigated spill, which are not covered by its subsidiary, the shell company EPGL. Does the EPA think that is acceptable? And so if we do the same for Payara and now Yellowtail, is that acceptable?
Steve, do you want to take that one?
Just Bauer, I think the question was partly raised for the EPA. Would you like to answer? And then I'm happy to jump in if needed.
What? What does Stevie can't talk? Steve?
Let me just address the issue of assurance and insurance as well. Again, just reiterating that our first priority with all our projects is to put in place the mitigations and process to prevent anything from happening. I know what we showed in the modelling was if something were to happen, and that's unlikely. Now, if something did happen, we will take that responsibility and repay and pay for all legitimate costs of that event. We have the financial capability and capacity to meet that responsibility, and both under the Guyanese law and the petroleum agreement as well for the target block. Now, on insurance, recognising that that's one of many sources of financing that may be used, it's not going to prevent or delay a response to any incident. It's more for the Exxon Guyana and our co-venturers to recover any costs associated with an incident after the fact. So we do have insurance for those sorts of issues, but as I said, we have the capacity and capability and responsibility to pay legitimate costs for any incident, and we are here for the long term. It's in both our interest and the government of Guyana's interest to tackle any incidents that do occur. We've invested billions of dollars into the country, and we're here for the long term.
All right. So the presentation said the ocean currents might take the oil away from Guyana to other Caribbean countries. So whose responsibility will it be to pay compensation to Caribbean countries for damage to their economies? And a lot of those countries depend on tourism, shipping, fishing. In the event of a well blowout, will ESSO or the Guyanese people be responsible?
Yeah, good question. And again, I'll reiterate that we'll pay for legitimate costs for any incident and have to see what an incident looks like and then what costs there are that legitimately need to be paid for, and we'll take responsibility for that.
All right. So the next part of the question is our Vice President, Mr. Jagdev, is reported to be asking Exxon to deposit US $2 billion for insurance. But when we recall the Macondo 2010 spill cleanup, the cost was more in the vicinity of 60 to 65 billion, and that included punitive damages. And so does the EPA consider 2 billion to be adequate if we were to get that?
Dr. Jailal,
Hello,
good
Mr.
night.
Carstrom. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Dr. Jailal and others, good night all. Very good questions indeed. But it's a question, I just want to say that we are currently working on the insurance aspects. And for this particular project, we are at the EIA stage, and we have not gone forward to approving. And yes, insurance as provided for in the Act will be considered. And we are actually developing and negotiating with the company on the guarantors agreement, as the DP mentioned, and as well as there is individual insurance provided for each of the projects. Thank you.
Right. And so finally, the Yellowtail proposal indicates that flow lines, umbilicals, abandoned equipment, mooring lines, anchor piles, subsea equipment, all will be abandoned on the seabed. And so this seems to be contrary to best practices in the oil industry. And so which best practice standards have you applied to this study? Is it the World Bank or the International Finance Corporation standards? Whose guidelines are you using? And what is the difference in risk between following international best practice and leaving all this toxic junk on the seafloor? How is this good decommissioning practice? And what guidelines are the EPA using to assess this in the EIA?
Well, I can start on that, and I'll let the company add on. This is Todd. So there is a preliminary decommissioning plan that's included in Volume 3 of the EIA, and it does cover this particular topic. It's a good question. The plan, which is preliminary in nature, envisions that the subsea equipment will be disconnected after it is flushed and prepared, and potentially left in place on the seafloor, as you indicated. That's after it's flushed, so there won't be hydrocarbon materials left down there per se. And so that said, the decommissioning plan also states that alternative strategies will also be considered during the detailed decommissioning plan development based on the results of a series of comparative assessments that are described. And those comparative assessments are based on consideration of international guidance, specifically that from the UK, as well as other international guidelines. But that's one in particular that the preliminary decommissioning plan calls out. It's notable that this is a preliminary plan for a reason, because that we're talking about something that will happen 20 plus years from now, and the state of the science, the state of regulations and guidance, I think we can all expect that will continue to evolve, and situations will continue to evolve. And so the preliminary decom plan points out very clearly that a detailed comparative assessment will be done at the time that the decommissioning is being proposed, shortly before that period, so that current situation.
Thank you, Dr. Jailal. Guys, you heard. I am so happy that you're listening to them. Dr. Jailal asked them what they will do with the waste from the oil spill. There was no answer. He asked about the insurance and where is the proof of the policy. Everybody gone numb, silent and dumb. You heard them. That topic, insurance topic, uncle, nobody wants to touch on. And you guys may not know why they are so silent on this subject matter. Ms. Harris, when a well blowout happens out there, Exxon Mobil may have to sell half of America. CNOOC may have to sell China. And Hess will have to sell the other half of America to take care of the damages that will be done to this Guyana and the entire region. You don't want to hear it more clearer than that. And instead, our Caribbean is living like hand to mouth. If a well blowout happen, our Caribbean people will be living like hand to mouth. Them will be living like kings and queens because they would have gone with our wealth and leave us with the disaster. This is why they don't want to sign and take on that full cover insurance. Them and their people, they don't want to live like Papa's uncle. And they don't, of course, and they don't want to even owe the region. They want to take the wealth, screw up the place, turn their back, and walk away with no responsibility. And all the leaders, all our leaders, they tongue tie or it cut out. You hear me, Josh?
Yes.
This most important thing, uncle and auntie, one of them say, we will take responsibility with nothing in writing. These people is past us, telling us they're here for a long term. You want to hear that, Miss Harris?
No, I want to see documents.
Exactly. We want to see a signed policy. Who will pay the Caribbean people in the event of oil spill? The man said they will pay for legitimate costs. What that means, uncle? This is the kind of con men, the kind of gangsters we're dealing with in this land. President Ali, Opposition Leader Harmon, and the Vice President Jagdale silent. Vice President said the other day, he seeking, to get Exxon Mobil to acknowledge, just to acknowledge a $2 billion. You heard Dr. Jailal said, $65 billion. And he made a mistake. They still have to pay more ongoing costs. Yes, uncle. This is how serious this thing is. Let me ask these leaders a question. Our leaders in this land. Why aren't you guys doing or saying anything on this one-sided contract? And most importantly, full cover insurance that can protect this region and its people. Are you guys benefiting financially from this oil sector personally? Huh? The EPA man said They are working on insurance. Uncle, the same thing they told us in the Payara consultation done. They noted our concerns, our recommendations, and nothing happened. The project was approved. He said there is individual insurance for each project. What he's not telling, or what he's not being truthful of, is what type of insurance we have on those projects, Auntie and Uncle. The insurance they give us, Auntie, can't even replace the cackabelly fish, or if a little boat go up in flames out there. That's the kind of insurance Guyana has on 1, 2, and 3. I asked them during the Payara consultation about the decommissioning money they're taking out from our oil now. You don't want me to repeat the answer they give me. But they are taking out our money for clean up the ocean floor 30 years from now, and them have it in their bank book. Reinvesting that money in the oil sector, charging us big interest. Money was supposed to be in our hands. They put it in them hands. It's like you pay the cleaner. You pay the cleaner years before to come clean your house. Wow. Man, these people don't fit to be there. Uncle and Auntie, some of these leaders do not fit to be there. Vice President Jagdeo should resign. The Natural Resource Minister, the headmaster, should go home tomorrow. These guys knows nothing. Nothing. You want to say anything, yeah? Go ahead.
This issue with legitimate costs, one of the things that's so striking about this entire saga with Exxon is that our leaders keep saying that we have this sanctity of contract. We have this sanctity of contract, but yet something as important as insurance, not only to protect our interest and cover our liabilities, we have to accept this handshake deal. We're supposed to take your word for it, but we're supposed to honor a contract that doesn't benefit us in any way, and we're supposed to take your word for it, the fact that you'll provide insurance for us. What happened with the BP, the Macondo well blowout, was horrible, and they had insurance, but the governments had to take the company to court in order for them to pay that $60-something billion.
Exactly.
And that took years. That took years for them to reach any kind of settlement and force the oil company to actually commit to paying that money. So they must be expecting us to take on the liabilities for anything going wrong with this project, or failing that, they must want us to wait for something to happen, and then we must sue them, which is a very lengthy process, in order for something for us to gain something from it. The whole thing is completely ridiculous.
My dear, they try to bamboozle we with 18 million US dollars, the signing bonus money.
Yeah, chump change.
And then turn and tell us when they get catch that they were keeping the money to pay lawyer fees for the border issue with Venezuela. 18 million US. Man, what you said there just now, the American government had to take ExxonMobil to court.
Yes.
We ain't got nothing to take nobody to court.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
But our rights to demand, it is our right to demand full cover insurance. And we have a man who heading the sector, what President Ali put to head the sector, telling us he gonna ask ExxonMobil for acknowledge a $2 billion insurance. Come on, man. This guy should be dismissed, President Ali.
Yes.
Jagdeo should not be sitting there. Jagdeo should not even be a clerk anywhere in the government to tell us this nonsense. You asking? You, come on, man. You asking for something when you can demand what you want. You know?
Yes.
It's like I telling you, Joshua, you got to, you know, you got to give 5 story, but tomorrow, me go settle for 1 if you promise me forgive me 1. You know? This kind of, you know, these chaps get you so riled up when they come. It's a good thing after I finish the program, I'm done with them. But, you know, Jago should not be there at all. Could you play another video?
My first question, Ms. Thompson. A question was asked to the gentleman about the quantity of ballast water coming on these ships. And we didn't get an answer to that. Could somebody answer that for me, please?
All right. That's one of my questions. I didn't want to play that question, but I'll speak on the question. Could you play the Trinidadian guy? I asked them 2 questions during that process Thursday night. And one of the questions, I just reminded them that they did not answer the question about the ballast water that is coming on the ships when they come to collect the oil. And they give an answer. Maybe I wouldn't want to elaborate on that now. I have to do that. I got to do that, especially for y'all, uncle and auntie, because it means so much. It is so important that I just can't give you in a minute. But it is extremely important for your ears. Did you get the Gary thing? Joe, go ahead and play it.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Moderator. I wanted to compliment you because you've been very good tonight. I also wanted to compliment all of the attendees, especially those that have spoken, because in all of the consultations that I have been to, I have never experienced so many intelligent people with so many intelligent questions, with most of them not being answered. So I wanted to compliment the responders because you all have done, a world-class job of evading the meat of the questions and skirting the answers in such a way that, quite frankly, as I said in the beginning of my presentation, it's very disappointing. I can understand that most of you don't have any loyalty to the people of Guyana or the Caribbean, even to the point where you can't even pronounce Guyana properly. That's very offensive to me. But I respect and appreciate that you have a job to do and you're doing it in the way that you've been taught to do it by those who have come before you. I just appeal to you to remember that you do have a spiritual obligation to be a good human being, because we are really not against the extractive sector. It's just that the experience we have had has been so bastardly. And if any of you would care to come to South Trinidad and to walk through some of the oil fields where many of our European and American predecessor extractors have been, you would realize what you're heading into in the next 20 years. And right now, I know that many of you are reading about it, but actually walking through it and experiencing it firsthand, it brings it to light. Nevertheless, I would embrace any of you on the responders table in the best of ways, and I would embrace you, and I would appreciate if you would consider our comments and our requests in the best of lights, because none of us here wish any of you ill will, regardless of the way you pronounce Guyana. I really am saying it in jest because it's been a very difficult and long meeting, very frustrating for all of us, because we all feel that you have not respected our questions, even though you know that you haven't. You very specifically navigated away from the answers. And I'm asking you as a gentleman as I know you are in your best of moments, to forget about your training and to remember that here we are, a citizen population that are accustomed to governments hoodwinking responsibilities in order to suck the oil, to suck the wealth, and much of it, as I said earlier, we're not paid fair value for volume. Oftentimes, and I'm certain that many people would not appreciate, but oftentimes funds are paid that don't end up where it should. So we feel very deprived and rubbed the wrong way. Nevertheless, I have to say thank God for COVID, because if not for COVID, this would not have been broadcasted online. And I think it's a good standard that we have been allowed to participate by this Zoom meeting. So now my questions. Certainly I reflect what Janet and others have said, that the questions that have been asked today, both online and verbally, should be properly recorded. Will they be recorded and produced as part of the EIA as is required in Trinidad law? That's the first question. And will the answers be included in the EIA? I think if you did that, it would be fair to us, because it did occur, and it will show to others who may be forced to read the document how we have been treated and how we feel. Because you have conducted this meeting and you have given these responses in response to our questions. And if it were on paper, we could all see it. So for the Guyanese officials representing the government, I would never forgive you if these questions are not included, because you are in fact Guyanese, born and bred, and you have friends and relatives who will be impacted and affected by this activity. And I think it's your duty not to lie, but to be fair. And it is not unreasonable, it is normal practice that questions and answers as per public consultations are included. My question regarding hazmat equipment was not responded to at all. And that is even before we were made aware of the very dangerous radioactive material. So the question still stands and is unanswered. What training for locals and locals working in the company and locals working in the local fire and other agencies that will be forced to respond, and what equipment is being provided for company officials, and whether any would be provided for the Guyanese network of emergency response, hazmat equipment. Thirdly, I am requesting and supporting what the previous questioner had asked, that all of the questions that are unanswered, and there are many more questions that will arise, would need to be properly vented and aired in the most diplomatic of meetings. And so I'm requesting not even one, but two separate convenings. It could even be as soon as Sunday. It could be Saturday. We are all available to work with you, and we know that you will be happy to work with us. So I'm requesting that we continue this meeting. It's far from over, and I think I hope you would consider responding in more detail to many of the questions that we shouldn't be forced to regurgitate. It's there on record. So I'm asking that it can be read. The other thing is, I wanted to support the comments made by Guyana in Jamaica earlier in the meeting, because here we are, and Guyana did send a contingent to COP26, and we are proposing to the G7 and that they assist us with funding to prevent and to fight against and to prepare for the oncoming slaughter, ecological and human slaughter of the climate change and rising sea levels. And yet Guyana is rushing ahead as though it doesn't exist, but strategically sending officials to beg for money, like paupers, like beggars in vagrants' clothing, to beg these nations. So I really hope we in the Caribbean will get a penny. Trinidad and Tobago stayed at the...
All right, Mr. Gary, you're breaking up.
My closing point is that Simone had mentioned, and I apologize that I did not mention, that seismic surveys have been occurring. Well, many of you may not be aware, but we've had several strandings of dolphins and one or two whales and several leatherbacks and other turtles found way upriver on beaches. It's been going on now for a couple of years, and I've continuously been asking my Guyanese contacts about the seismic surveys that are occurring in Guyana. But I'm just wondering, those on the respondents table, are you aware of the impacts of seismic surveys? And if we had enough time, I would like to ask you what you're aware of before I see what I'm about to see, because it would have been quite a lovely trick. Nevertheless, the response that I'm going to give you, because I'm sure you would say that you're not aware of the serious negative impacts that the seismic surveys cause, but in 2017, there are two separate peer-reviewed studies produced by separate sets of professors in two different areas of the world, both of which showed clearly that the microorganisms that live in the water are completely decimated within 2 kilometers of the seismic blast. Now, just let that soak in a little bit. I didn't say it. They said it, and it's peer-reviewed studies. So that we're not talking about the impact on mammals. And presently, the international standard for seismic surveys is you have marine mammal observers at the front of the vessel. And if the scared, tortured creature jumped out of the water or showed its head, you would tell the blasters to stop. Wait, I'm seeing a dolphin, I'm seeing a whale, give it time to run. But we still have, even though we know that the microorganisms, the krill in the water, are completely decimated, and notwithstanding the fact that they do have a swift regeneration rate, the fact is that the seismic surveys occur sometimes for weeks or months. So the impact is continuous and ongoing. And so I'm wondering if the Guyanese officials have any consideration or are aware of these studies, and if not, why not? You should be aware. And secondly, I'm raising the point that we've been fortunate that we've had these two studies, which have been relatively easy to assess and measure the impact. But on the planet, we still don't have any studies whatsoever on the impact of the microorganisms that live in the soil. And our fishermen here in Trinidad and elsewhere in the world have continuously complained that the traditional fishing areas, which we call banks, which are the areas where fish aggregate for a number of still unknown reasons.
Mr. Gary, sorry,
yes.
We're way past our time, and I would have to ask you to wrap up quickly, so just take the next couple of seconds, because you still have the opportunity to send your written submissions to the agency. Yeah, so if you can just wrap up that submission, yes.
So much. I am wrapping up, and I'm so happy that you have stopped me twice, because it's very normal for me. But nevertheless, I'm asking if you are aware of the impact of seismic surveys on krill and how you have dealt with that as a Guyanese regulatory body, whether you've been aware, and if not, why not? Because if you're not aware, I feel so hurt and disappointed, because there would be a clear lack of professionalism in the examination of impact. And secondly, I'm asking that when you become aware of these two studies, which we'll be happy to furnish you, although they're available online with a very simple search, whether you will ask the question of what is the impact of these seismic surveys on the microorganisms that live in the soil, or the slow-moving creatures like crabs and mollusks that cannot flee from the sun. I also want to make you aware that all the way back in 1994, some 26 years ago, a study was done in Canada of which the province the Food and Agricultural Organization to supply them with scientists to conduct these studies. Parkinson is still alive, and those studies show that every single organism flees at full speed in a straight line away from the sound of the seismic surveys. There is still very little studies 26 years after in the world that show the impact of this fleeing process, but common sense and those with basic biology and an understanding of fish behavior know that fish feed and hunt in schools. So if this study shows conclusively that the fish disperse in a straight line, moving away from a sound for full distance of 50 kilometers outside of the study range, one can easily understand that the schools will be dispersed after 50 kilometers and be very far apart, and so the defense mechanisms will be weakened. In 1995, there was a study that showed that, in particular, redfish, the hearing follicles, which they use to feed because the fish's eyes are on the sides and they hunt going forward using sound. The hearing follicles continue to degenerate continuously after exposure to the sound. So, as you can understand, in our region, particularly in Guyana, many migratory species come from the north, all the way from eastern Canada. They come down into our waters to spawn in the winter months. So this is not just a Guyanese issue. This is very much an Atlantic Ocean issue. And so I'm asking you to have the greatest of sensitivity and to come back to us so that we would be allowed to vent our concerns and you would be allowed to gather these concerns and to do a proper examination, because we all know that the government of Guyana are going to rubber stamp this project, and so we are forced now to depend on your goodwill and responsibility to steer and to steward our oceans and our people to a sustainable level of.
Just for the record, the audio that you were listening to, the background noise, it comes from the recording, the Zoom recording, and not from us. So we apologize if you weren't able to hear, but of course that's out of our control. Yes.
Brother Gary, I could feel your pain sitting down here listening to you.
Yes.
I could feel how you're begging for an extension for them to answer these questions. All those questions. The rising sea levels. And Jagdeo wants to rush ahead. Pump, baby, pump. Pump like you never pumped before. Guys, my question during the program was about the agreement. Exxon parent company had promised the EPA head, Vincent Adams, to sign and send back, agreeing to take full responsibility of any costs above and beyond the insurance coverage given to us by EEPGL for damages. Our Vice President, Jagdeo, knew that. He knew that ExxonMobil parent company had to give us that insurance policy. But you know what, Uncle? This man disregarded that and approved the third project with the same limited insurance we get in Lisa 1 and 2. You ask yourself, man. Ask yourself if this vice president really loves Guyana and the region people or ExxonMobil. When Vincent Adams talked about that and many other things, he was sent on leave. Yes, this is Guyana. The man is off the job. Beautiful Guyana. They never answered that question until now. I also followed up on a question asked about the quantity of ballast water that comes to Guyana in every ship. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, just to let you know, all those persons you listen to spoke extensively on the dangers Guyana and the entire region facing with all these projects from an environmental perspective.
Yes.
Including lack of adequate insurance to handle disasters that faces us and the Caribbean. Just a little uncle was set us to the deal, the contract, the money aspect of these projects. I just want you to know this EIA consultation does not deal with money aspects of this oil industry. Whatever you ask them questions pertaining to what Guyana getting with the one-sided contract, they tell you plain. If you got to go deal with Exxon, Mobil, and your government. Yeah. That's what they tell you. Them only deal with the EIA. Nothing to do with money or contract. These consultations is only for them to tell Guyana how your fishing industry will be affected, not who gonna pay y'all. How your water will be contaminated, not who will compensate us. The rising of the sea level, how they plan to deal with them deadly chemicals, them garbage and so on. How your roads and sea defenses will be affected. What will become of the mangroves and so on. Them don't deal with money. Money, you got to ask Exxon Mobil and your government. You got to ask Vice President Jagdeo, because he's running it. And President Afanali and the opposition leader Harmon. Them you got to ask about these things. It's long overdue, we got to leave now. Please don't forget what I told you guys earlier. I am also on TikTok. So you can tick me or you can tickle them. Good night and God bless. We will take some phone calls and see how we can ride through for a few more minutes with you guys.
99.1 and 99.5 FM, that's your station ID check. And of course, this is the Glenn Lall Show. 622-2222 and the 226-7453. Those are the ways you can connect with us this evening here on the Glenn Lall Show, the Wednesday edition.
With what they're going on here, Joshua and Miss Harris,
Yes.
this country needs to shut down. This country needs to shut down.
Yes.
I want you guys to know this fourth project is not bringing up 120,000 barrel a day. It's bringing up double. It's bringing up 250,000 barrel of oil per day. Good night, sir. You're live on air.
Yeah, good night. I'd like to ask a question, please.
Quickly.
This country, Guyana, is running like in Afghanistan, where they had to run out the U.S. people, and Guyanese would be soon have to run to catch plane to get out of Guyana because the toxicity, what is going to happen to that land. The president and all of these guys, they don't prepare themselves because they got passport to leave the country and leave you all in the mess. All the toxic is going to kill you all out. So that's what I want you all to know.
Thank you.
My brother, it's a serious thing. It's a serious thing with the toxicity in that country, with the water and the land. These people don't have no regards to you. And I'm going to tell you this final thing. They're treating me worse than slavery, and they don't have no, they're worse than slavery and they don't have no indentured servant, is everybody. I'm going to ask you this question too. How many Americans are in Guyana? How many Americans? And what part in Guyana they are?
Oh, they're living in Marriott and the Pegasus and the superb infrastructures that you have around, with all the international standards.
All
Yeah, that's where they live. They don't live in places where me and you and these people in the radio station live. Thank you, my friend.
When the disaster starts, they are going to get the first right out of this country.
My friend.
Jack Young and the president and his family.
My friend.
Have a good night.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Disaster already stepping. We are already living in disaster. We don't have to wait for that, my friend. We just don't have to wait for that. And you said we're living in misery. It's beyond that. It's beyond that. You have any telephone call there?
No. Somebody has a question here.
Yes, go ahead with the question.
In respect of the marine life that's being contaminated by ExxonMobil, and our government is...
1 second. 1 second. Good evening, Ms. Simone. You're live on air.
Good evening. Oh dear, hello. Good
You're
evening.
live. Good evening. Ms. Simone?
Yes, I'm here.
You're live. Would you like to contribute? I have just played a few...
Subject. Oh, I believe we spoke about this earlier. I'm actually in the process of having a closer look. We spoke about the point I raised at the Yellowtail Environmental Impact Assessment hearing.
Yes.
Public discussion concerning the fact that the firm ERM appears to have been doing all of the major impact assessment studies for EEPGL. And I'm actually right now sitting here really quite taken looking back at all the studies that have been done. And what is very clear, I raised a concern because when the consultant was speaking, he kept referring to previous work they had done. But there seems to be a long-term relationship between this firm and ESSO and the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana, which keeps selecting the same firm.
That's a new angle.
To do the studies for ESSO. Now, the Environmental Protection Act requires that the firm is independent. And this is no slight on the individuals who work for a firm and not meant to degrade their person or their work, but you cannot claim independence when you have a long-term running relationship doing all of the studies for the applicant.
Correct.
Because you have a financial relationship now. This is a firm that established itself in Guyana and effectively is doing all of Exxon's work for it.
You become
Now,
a family member.
Well, you're not independent, and Guyanese need to look to the Environmental Protection Agency for failing to do its duty. The Environmental Protection Act is very clear. There must be independence, and that independence has to be judged on a series of criteria, not the least of which is, do you really think that a firm is independent when they keep doing the studies one after the other? What, they don't have any other qualified firm to do this job?
Exactly.
Why is this one being selected over and over again? And why is Guyana's Environmental Protection Agency failing the nation to look into this particular pattern that itself is responsible for and asking itself, well, am I doing the right thing?
You throw a different perspective on this ERM relationship with ExxonMobil and the EPA. I never looked at it. I never thought of it from that perspective. But it's very troubling. It's a troubling point you raised there.
Well, it's more than it's not, to me, it's not even the case of troubling. I think it's just basic incompetence on part of the Environmental Protection Agency. It cannot explain itself here. And like I said, I'm just reviewing all the material now, and what alerted me to it was the statements of the consultants about all the studies they had been doing over the years. That's all well and fine, but where is there an independent third-party evaluation of this relationship? This is a marriage. These two, this is a long-term. Some people aren't married this long.
Exactly. That's why I told you they have become family. I was told this afternoon that the Sham Nokta the signature on the draft document of the EIA is they have forged it. And he's
well, I wouldn't know about that, but
yes.
if it is in fact the case that he did not provide that and was not part of the study, because when I asked a question about independence with respect to the fact that Mr. Nocta is an elected official of the government of Guyana, they said it was a mistake had been made in putting his name up there. So if in fact, I find it odd that you would manage to go through all these rounds of consultation with a person's name signed there against yours and not notice that it shouldn't be there. So that's a serious issue which Mr. Nocta will need to take up with them.
Well, I am told.
But I think it goes back to what I was speaking to in the consultation, and it's the credibility. The credibility of the applicant, and now I believe the credibility of the firm, because I would say that it's an environmental consulting firm. There must be some point at which you have to say to your client, if I am the one that is consistently doing your studies, I expose you to criticisms of a lack of independence. But I think that Guyana has been so poorly managed. I mean, we have a situation where both of our governments that have dealt with Exxon have behaved dastardly towards the people of Guyana. The first one in signing the most extraordinarily, spectacularly stupid agreement, and the second one in not caring enough or having the wherewithal and competence to audit the expenses.
The competence.
So here you have, now we have a government who, the first one didn't bother to ensure there was a baseline study done to protect the fisheries and various elements of Guyanese economy. The second one hasn't, continues to indulge this process that really doesn't account for it. And the first one is a giveaway. The second one, they don't care to look after the money. Are they really going to be looking after the fish?
They're looking after themselves.
Are they going to look after human health? Are they going to look after things that are more difficult to count and to see? And there were some very serious questions raised in this process. All of the waste that's coming offshore is randomly being put in various neighborhoods across Guyana. This is incredibly poor decision-making and management, and the waste is not being properly accounted for to the public. There is no proper monitoring of the impact of the processing of that waste, the disposal of the waste on shore or offshore. And to date, we still haven't done right by the fishers to actually examine what really are the underlying causes for the decline in fishery. And you cannot have a massive oil industry that's sitting offshore and assume that it's not culpable. That would be a stretch. I mean, you'd have to have sufficient data to look at the cause, but it is well documented in the scientific literature that seismic surveys are damaging to marine life. I think Mr. Gary Aboud went through that in detail. So, you can't discount this. And so in sum, what I would say is that what has really come out in the Gas to Shore EIA, which is the first one I went to, and the this last Yellowtail one, is that the Environmental Protection Agency of Guyana is really grossly failing in its duties. And I know this already because I have objected to a series of environmental impact assessments that they have waived. And after insisting that, insisting that they were doing well, they withdrew a whole series of them, admitting that they had been systematically breaking the law. So this agency is a mess. It's like an asylum that's being run by its inmates. And it needs to get itself
like the
sorted
government.
out, because it's got a very fundamental duty to the people of Guyana, and that duty is to protect the human health, the natural environment, and also to consult and ensure that there is public understanding and participation and decision making that affect our lives and our future and our children's lives and their future. And the tendency to want to get up on air and defend the most spectacularly stupid things it's doing is something that they need to step back from and think very seriously about their obligation, because they're failing in that right now. And that's as much as I would say here. I still haven't completed the review of all the previous studies, but I'm sure there will be much more to find in the process.
Beautifully said, Simone. Simone, thank you so much. On behalf of all of Guyana, I want to say thank you. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. We're in it together, and we need to stand up now because there is no other time but now.
Thank you so
Good night
much.
to you and your
Good night.
your-
Good night.
your
We'll stay in
viewers. Bye.
touch. We'll stay in touch. Thanks. Man,
You see?
these are people who understand.
They
the thing
overstand
within the
it.
bloodstream.
Exactly.
You know?
And they can see that what's happening
I
is
always
that we're
tell my
being
staff, if you
advantaged.
don't understand this media business, if it's not in your bloodstream, you can't do it. You know? Man, Guyanese, I am lost for words when you listen to these experts.
Yep.
The way they present these things. She said Guyana is being run
Like an
by
asylum.
inmates
Like
of an asylum. The mad people running the asylum. That's what she said. This is why I told you guys. Vice President Jagdev should not be there. He should be fired. He should be dismissed forthwith. Tomorrow morning, I hope I wake up and hear that Vice President Jagdev is no longer in charge of the oil sector or any sector in Guyana.
Precisely.
My God. Wow. Good evening, sir.
Good night, sir.
Make a contribution. Let's get going. We're running out of time.
A group of fishermen meet with the Minister of Agriculture, and he doubt that the spill from the Exxon Mobil is not affecting the fishing industry. What's going on?
You just heard what the expert said.
Right.
These people are living behind time. Something is wrong with them mentally.
Yes.
I think they're living beyond pockets.
They're not for real. They're not for real. They cannot hold press conferences and tell the nation this. They have to go to the bottom house, to every bottom house of the fishermen and talk them kind of craziness.
Yeah, but certain ministry need technical minister.
My friend, you just heard what that woman said. She said Guyana is being run like a mental asylum where the inmates is running the institution. That's what is happening here. It's a set of mad people running the asylum. It's a set of crazy people running this country. I have been saying this for the last year since I began this program. I have been talking about the seriousness of what Guyana faces. You heard the expert is saying now, it's not only Guyana, but the entire region will be affected with this thing. And we don't have, my friend, the basic, the most important ingredient, what Ashley Singh said a house should have, every business should have, every person should have. He said, the man, no, our Ashley Singh, the financial guru, said insurance. He said insurance is a vital toolkit that every individual should have. Here we are playing with fire. We're seeing fire before our eyes that surrounds us. And this man and his government is not talking about insurance. Any other contribution?
Expand little on radioactive.
No.
We'll deal with that.
No, I can't. Yes, I can do that tonight. A matter of fact, hold a second.
Of radioactive will take on their lives.
Hold a second.
Yes, sir.
When ERM and Exxon was asked that question, They said it's too technical and it will take a while to break it and to explain that. All right? Thanks. I got to take another call. Yes, good evening. Good evening. Good evening, sir. All right, we missed that call. We have to take the calls. When you guys call in, please be ready, get going, quicker, let's go. Time is of the essence in this country with what we are facing. So please get to the top, get to your question, let's kick it off and go. The gentleman asked about radioactive materials. Man, that's a serious thing. I learned that thing since about 15 years ago, where Vladimir Putin used that same radioactive material
Allegedly.
and killed a man by the name of Levinsko in England. Any more calls, Hazardous?
No, we don't have any more.
All right. I'm getting signs that I have to get off. So, a lot have been said. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Mr. Glenn,
Good evening.
does anyone knows that those radioactive material can be used to make dirty bombs?
Oh, they make everything, bro. They can wipe out all Guyana.
And those questions that the woman asked prior in regards to that company that was doing the consultation, we asked them those questions at the opening public hearing about, are you working for Exxon or are you really working for Guyana government? And have you done previous studies for the
EIA.
Exxon? Yes, for Exxon in other countries, and their answer was clearly yes. So it was a whole bunch of collusion going on, and we see clearly through it, and we walked out of the public hearing.
Precisely. It's a family. Exxon them is a family. They have people in Israel, they have them in Scotland, you have some in Trinidad, you have in Nigeria, you have them all over. It's one family. When they move to a country, that same family going there. You don't see the families. But guess what? Their companies are the ones getting the projects with our locals.
Yep.
You figure what I'm saying?
Yes, it's like a gangster, the mob leader, and the soldiers, and it's a silent agreement between them. They know what to do.
Exactly. And they're all over. They're sitting in Barbados, they're sitting in the Virgin Islands, they're sitting in Israel, they're sitting in Jamaica, they're sitting all over. But they are making money. Their payments from the oil companies going to that country, they collect what they have to collect and send the dribblings here to pay the local people. ExxonMobil don't hire anybody. ExxonMobil doesn't give no contracts.
It's
You hear
a
me?
scam.
Yes, it's all a ring. It's a ring. And our leaders, thank you, my friend. Thank you. They're just shaking hands that I have to get off. Thanks a lot. Do you want to make any other quick contribution?
No, thank you. That's all.
Good night.
All right, bye.
Yes, they're saying it's all a sham. And guess what? Our leaders cannot fathom that. They can't understand that.
They must be.
Guys, thank you for listening. I think it was a wonderful Wednesday evening.
It was.
God bless and enjoy the remainder of the evening.